Hey, Bob Gardner here from LiberatedMan.com. This is a Liberated Man podcast. Today was a Monday morning. We just finished a weekend at a church conference, and I was reminded of something that happened to me years and years ago. Before I went, I think it was before I went as a missionary down to Brazil for a couple of years for my church. This is a while ago. I came back in 2001, so we're talking a little while ago anyway. And I remember I was sitting there with my dad one day, and I had some questions about things that were taught inside of the church, what you would call doctrine or teachings inside of the church. I had my, I don't know, they were just kind of like, they weren't disturbing. I wasn't like trying to go anywhere, but they were real questions that I had. And I remember my dad sat me down one day, and he said, it's all right to have questions about stuff, son. Like, I got loads of questions. And it was the first time that my dad had really opened up to me about something like that. The first time I realized it was okay to have questions, to like not actually just agree right away with everything that's going on. Not just like, oh, well, I believe it because some authority said it, but to actually question it, to actually bring my heart to the surface and encounter what is being taught and figure out what's coming up in me because of the teachings, right? To actually engage with them in a real way. It's the first time I realized that was okay, because before then, my only impression was like, if it's taught, you have to accept it. And that is, in my opinion, right now, the worst possible way that you could approach any type of religious experience. If all that's taught is that because the leaders teach it, that you must accept it, then you run the risk of somebody who is being fake their whole life, like I was for a long period of time. But also you miss all of the richness that comes from actually bringing yourself to engage 100% with what's being taught. Even if you don't agree with it right away, even if it bugs you in some way, like it will call something up inside of you that is a massive opportunity for growth. Massive opportunity for growth. Sometimes I go to church on Sunday and I'm not like, it's not like beatific visions or anything. Sometimes I'm just ticked off by things that are said or done or whatnot. And those are wonderful opportunities for me to learn and to grow, even though sometimes it's not necessarily what I would choose if I were going to church. And so we sit there and my dad tells me about these questions, some questions that he had for years and years and years. And he said somewhere along the way he learned, and he had some of these when he was a missionary back down in Germany. Somewhere along the way he learned that he could have a question and simply understand that there's an answer to it somewhere. And if he didn't have the answer right now, he'd stick it in a little box in his mind and put it up on the shelf and have the question there. This for me is a powerful concept. A lot of people think that if you have a question about something, that it automatically means that, like, if there's no answer to it right away, then there's some problem. But here my dad was able to tell me that he could live with a question for decades. And it doesn't disrupt his life. It's just a question that is waiting for an answer. And that reminds me of something that Rainer Maria Rilke once said. He wrote in this book, Letters to a Young Poet, he wrote to this young poet, he was telling him, look, live the questions now, and one day you might live right on into the answer. But for now, the question is what matters. And so I remembered this, and then we come back to this weekend's conference session, and of course I've got questions in my mind, and I know many guys, some of the guys I'm working with, but many people who have questions about what's being taught and are trying to figure out how to work with it in their life. But like, the problem is that they've been taught that they have to accept it or not accept it, instead of just engage with it and figure out what kind of transformation can happen inside them because they engage with it. And so here I am on the other side of things, looking at this and going like, well, shoot, if I had known when I was younger than when my dad set me aside, that it was okay to just engage with things instead of either blindly accept them or blatantly reject them, then I could have learned so much more and been so much happier in my life because I was allowed to be 100% me, doubts and all, questions and all, knowledge and all. And that's something that I find is exceptionally important, because it's not just in the realm of religion, right? There's a ton of work out there in the world about like how you're supposed to maintain your body. Shoot, healing practices all over the place, and I've studied a number of traditional ones and energy healing practices and stuff. But like those are out there in the world too. And people like freak out about these things. And then there's Western medicine and all this kind of stuff. And there's all these authorities that talk on these different subjects. And the question then arises, do I just listen to what's being said? Do I just quote a journal article? Or do I actually engage with it with my life? Test things out, see what's work, come to some conclusions, and find ultimately what brings me happiness, health, and joy. Same things happens with relationships. There's all these relationship gurus out there that'll tell you this is the proper way to raise your children, this is the proper way to live with your wife and your kids. And there's relationship gurus that contradict each other, and some of them, like, they'll tell you this is what a sexual relationship should be like in your marriage and this one isn't, and so on and so forth. But they're giving their information based on what either they've read from psychologists or what they've learned from their own life. None of that is wrong. But it only becomes wrong when we just blatantly accept it because they're an authority figure and they said something. If you, for instance, take what I say as some kind of authority figure, that's hilarious. But if you did take what I said as some kind of authority figure and didn't engage with it fully in your life, we would have the same problem. It's not what I say that matters. It's how you fully engage with it, how you come alive, how you take it into your life, and how you make something happen with it. And then you either accept it or reject it or whatever, but you've learned, you've transformed, that's what makes the difference. So if you've come off, if you're a member of the Mormon church and you've just come off this conference weekend and you had some things hit you or some things that disturbed you, or if you had some questions, great. Awesome, engage with them. If you didn't have questions and you had some amazing insights and experiences, great, awesome. Don't just let it sit there either, engage with it. Okay, but if you're not, and you didn't come off of some interesting conference weekend, but you went to another seminar last weekend, or you were learning something in a college class, or you were doing something of that nature, and you had something either bug you or hit you, that is a perfect opportunity for you as a whole person to wake up, engage with it, and live your life. Okay, my invitation to you today is to have questions, but consider where you're just accepting authority instead of opening up and getting your whole heart in the fray to learn what you can learn, as risky as it is, to be yourself in your life, to accept what questions you have, to accept what thoughts you have, to accept all of that as just a part of who you are in living on this planet right now, and to move forward from that place instead of constantly just taking what other people say as the truth and never actually discovering your own truth because you're so busy. And I got so busy for so many years accepting what other people say, deferring to other people's knowledge to the point where I had none. It's better, in my opinion, right now, to test it out on your own, to not know a lot, maybe a little bit, but it's knowledge that I've gained on my own. So that's my invitation for you today. Consider where you're just accepting authority instead of actually taking it for a test drive, learning for yourself, and making your own decisions. Until next time.